Well, the number of people on the move against their will is unprecedented, forced to flee their homes because of conflict, violence, and persecution. According to a new report by the United Nations Refugee Agency, at the end of last year, nearly 90 million people around the world had fled their homes. That's more than double the number 10 years ago. And by the end of this year, the number is expected to top 100 million for the first time. This latest increase is being driven by an escalation of existing conflicts and by new violence. The war in Ukraine, as an example, has triggered one of the fastest and largest refugee crises since the Second World War. 7.5 million Ukrainians have fled the country, and more than 8 million are now internally displaced. For more, let's bring in Chris Melzer here. He's the senior spokesperson at the UNHCR's Berlin office. Good to see you again, Chris. So tell us, this latest report, it paints a dire picture. How did we get to this grim milestone? We're looking at 100 million displaced people soon.
Yeah, these are indeed depressing figures. And as you have mentioned, we have the let's say, old conflicts like Syria and Afghanistan, who counted on this, but Ukraine is, of course, another problem, a new problem. We had displaced persons in Ukraine before, but we have now about 5 million refugees and 7 million internally displaced persons from Ukraine alone. But there are also other countries like Venezuela, like Sudan, like Myanmar. They are probably not in the headlines now, but millions of refugees are displaced inside of these countries or from these countries.
The focus, at least here in this part of the world right now, is very much on Ukraine. Is the Ukraine conflict taking attention away from the need to help displaced people in other parts of the world, Chris?
I'm afraid so. I mean, we're talking a lot about Ukraine and not about, just mention South Sudan. There are 2.4 million refugees from South Sudan. There are millions of internally displaced persons in many countries, especially in African countries. And we have not talked that much about Syria in recent weeks and months. On the other hand, the Ukraine situation probably shows that everybody can be a refugee suddenly, that these people indeed need help. And actually, it's not the big difference between the refugees over there and refugees here. I was in so many places around the world, and the pictures are always the same, of people trying to flee, trying to save their lives.
So what kind of future are we looking at, Chris, given the proliferation of armed conflicts and other crises, including the climate emergency?
Yes, this is indeed a big problem. If you take a look at the figures and you see that 70% of the refugees are from just 5 countries: Syria, Venezuela, Afghanistan, South Sudan, Myanmar, and there's a 6th country now, Ukraine, of course. So imagine we could solve only 1 or 2 of these conflicts. We would be a big step ahead. But indeed, right now, the situation looks dire. Also with conflicts probably kindled by the climate crisis. On the other hand, in the last year, 5.7 million displaced persons could return home. So there is a glimmer of hope.
Glimmer of hope, always good. Thank you, Chris. Chris Melzer of the UNHCR here in Germany.